The Outcast by Reynolds. Filthy trees, Goral rumbled. They offend me, Blighthoof. The Lord Duke of Festerfane stroked his steed's cadaverous neck as he spoke. The horse thing squealed, shaking its lice-infested mane in what might have been agreement. It pawed at the ground with a hoof, causing the root-riddled soil to split and smoke. Goral leaned forwards in his mouldering saddle as his rotbringers felled another tree. It toppled with a bone-shaking groan and struck the ground with a loud crash. "That's the way! Hew them down, my brothers! Shatter their branches and befoul their stumps! Make the land weep sweet tears in Nurgle's name," Goral said, gesturing with his axe Lifebiter. Filth-stained blades and rusty cleavers bit down again and again, tearing, gouging, chopping. Bark ruptured and roots tore loose of the soil with popping sounds as branches cracked and bent. More trees fell, clearing his warband a path into the heart of the vast, black forest known as the Writhing Weald. It had taken them days to get this far. Then the Writhing Weald was more stubborn than most. It had swallowed a dozen warbands over the centuries, remaining verdant and untamed despite the best efforts of Nurgle's servants. But no longer. As a knight in good standing of the Order of the Fly, it was Goral's duty. No, his honor. To make these simpering lands fit for the glopsome tread of Grandfather himself. And once he found the forest's heart, Nurgle's will would be done. "Chop them down and stoke the fires," Goral said, trusting his voice to carry to the fly-blown ears of all 77 of his warriors. "We will. Choke the air with smoke and ash, and call down a boiling rain once we have found the great stones which are the heart of this place. Grandfather will water the soil with the blessed pus of his garden, and we shall make this wild place fit for civilized men. By this axe I so swear." Goral lifted Lifebiter and felt the weight of the baleful blessing wrought into its rust-streaked blade. It pulled at his soul and left pleasant welts on his flesh where he clutched it. The weapon had a cruel life of its own, desirous of nothing save the chopping of bark and bone. It had been a gift, a token of appreciation by the Lady of Cankerwall, whose fungal domain he'd preserved from the depredations of the ancient changeworm Yule. He thought of her and smiled. Regal and infested, clad in tattered mouldering finery, she had seemed sad at his leaving and pressed Lifebiter on him as a sign of her esteem. The axe had been borne by her father in decay, and his father before him all the way back to the beginning of the Age of Chaos, and now Goral carried it, with her blessing and in her service. Its pitted blade had been touched by the finger of Nurgle himself and imbued with a mighty weird. It was an axe worthy of the name Lifebiter, and he hoped he was worthy of its destructive potential and her trust in him. Like Blighthoof or the scabrous armor fused to his swollen flesh, it was a sign of Grandfather's favor. And that favor was why he, above all others, had been sent to accomplish this task. For it required speed of thought and surety of limb, as well as faith in the will of Nurgle. Goral raised his axe and bellowed encouragement as another tree fell. Around him, his vanguard of pestilent knights did the same, calling out to their brothers in support or mockery as they saw fit. Like Goral, they too served the Order of the Fly, and had supped from the unhallowed grail which dangled from Nurgle's belt. In them was the strength of despair, and the will of the gods made manifest. "Beat them, break them, burn them," the knights chanted in low, hollow voices. Their fly-blown steeds screeched and buzzed, tearing at the ground with claws and hooves. Goral joined his voice to theirs, but as he did so, the remaining trees began to sway slightly, as if in a breeze. The chanting died away, as did the sounds of labor, as every rotten ear strained to hear the sound, in case it was the sign that they had been seeking. It was a soft thing, like loose leaves scraping across stone. Goral tightened his grip on his axe. Soft sounds were dangerous in the forests of Gyren. Blighthoof stirred restlessly. The horse thing whickered, and Goral patted the sagging flesh of its neck. "Easy," he murmured. Far above in the high canopy, branches rustled and then fell silent. Goral looked around. He feared no mortal enemy, but this was something else. He could smell it stirring in the dark, like sap gone sour and rotting leaves. An old smell, almost familiar, but not. It choked him and made his stomach turn. The forest was alive with 1,000 eyes, watching, waiting. He'd fought the tree spirits before, with axe and balefire. Nevertheless, it was unnerving. They came so suddenly, and with such ferocity, that even a moment of inattention could mean the difference between life and death. "Where are you?" he muttered. "I can feel you watching. Are you afraid, little saplings? Do you fear the bite of my steel?" He lifted his weapon, waiting. Nothing answered his challenge. But they would. This realm, the Jade Kingdom's entire, was waking up now, and all of the dark things within it. The Forest Queen had been driven from her hidden vale and into the wilds. Now trees marched on Festafane and 1,000 of Nurgle's other holdings. What was once a certainty had become mutable. Goral couldn't have been more pleased. It had been decades at least since he had faced a worthy challenge. The sound faded as quickly as it had come. As it paled, a new, more welcome noise replaced it. The guttural barking of chaos hounds. The beasts loped into view, bounding over fallen trees with long-limbed grace. They were shaggy and covered in sores, their blunt, squashed muzzles streaming with slobber and snot. They had bulging, compound eyes and worm-pale tongues which lolled as they sprang at Goral in greeting. Their high-pitched yelps momentarily overwhelmed even the crash of falling trees, and Goral laughed as he swatted an overly affectionate hound off his saddle. "Hail and well met, my lord," a rasping voice said. A broad figure, swaddled in grimy furs and filthy armor, stepped out of the trees, one bandage-wrapped hand resting on the cracked hilt of his sword. His other hand held a thin, broken shape balanced on his shoulder. The Houndmaster's face was swollen with what might have been insect bites, and tiny black shapes writhed beneath his tight, shiny flesh. "Hail and well met, Ukta. Good hunting, then?" Goral asked. Uktor had fought beside him for longer than any other, and was, like Goral, a servant of the Order of the Fly. The Houndmaster was strong in the ways of war, and as loyal as one of the four-legged beasts which trotted at his side. Goral had dispatched him to locate their prey, as his rotbringers set the fires that would flush them from hiding. He gestured to the thing on Ukta's shoulder. "Have you brought me a prize?" "Aye, my lord," Ukta said. He let his burden fall to the ground and planted a foot on its back. He caught hold of the protruding, antler-like branches and bent its inhuman features up for his lord's inspection. The tree thing was dead, or as good as. Golden sap ran from the cracks in its face and stained the ground where Ukta had deposited it. "Can it speak?" Ukta made a face. "Can they ever? They are but brutes. No more capable of conversation than my maggot hounds," he said. He let the head sag, and it thumped to the ground. The whole thing had begun to shiver and crack apart. It was dying. Goral could see the blistered wounds where the infectious jaws of Ukta's hounds had savaged the tree spirit. They were such fragile things for being so deadly. "But where there is one, there are others," Goral said. Uktor nodded. "Aye. They're there, my lord. Your fires have flushed them out, and my hounds have their scent now," Ukta said with a phlegm-soaked cough. "We caught this one out easily enough, but it was a straggler." He patted the head of one of the Chaos Hounds affectionately, and the squirming beast wriggled in pleasure, blistered tail thumping the ground. The others gamboled about their master's bandaged feet, gargling in excitement or snuffling at the dying tree spirit. "The others are deeper in the wood, all fleeing in the same direction, I'd wager." "To the stones at the forest's heart," Goral growled. "Aye," Ukta said, giving a gap-toothed smile. He slapped his corroded breastplate with a flabby hand. "Sure as my black heart beats, my lord. We find the others, and we find the Heartstones, all together and waiting for the axe to fall." Goral sat back in his saddle and nodded in satisfaction. "Finally," he murmured. The Heartstones were the unyielding soul of this place, or so the Lady of Cankerwall had claimed, an unnatural outcrop of sorcerous rock which spilled crystal-clear waters to feed the ever-growing roots of the forest. She was a seer without equal, and could read the skeins of fate and moment in the effluvial smoke of her bubbling pox cauldrons. He remembered her voice in that instant, and the way she had looked at him with her blind, crusted eyes. There had been something there, he thought, some trace of what? Sadness? What did you see, my lady? He pushed the thought aside and ran a thumb along the edge of Lifebiter's blade and relished the moment of pain. Pain brought clarity. Clarity was Nurgle's gift to his chosen, to see the world as it was, stripped bare of the tattered masks of desire and hope, leaving only a beautiful despair. There was comfort in surrender and joy in acceptance. There was love there, at the heart of all endings, and serenity at the end of all things. And it was that bleak serenity which the Order of the Fly served. Goral glanced at his knights. He knew their names and stories, for they were all brothers in despair. Some were heroes in their own right, like brawny, boil-encrusted Sir Culgus, who had held the Bridge of Scabs for 12 days against the blood-mad hordes of Khorne, while others, like young pallid woes in his seeping ochre tabard and rune-marked bandages, had yet to earn their spurs in battle. Pride swept through him as, one and all, they met his gaze. He raised Lifebiter. For the honour of the Order of the Fly, and for the glory of Nurgle, he said. Serrated swords, jagged axes, and filth-encrusted maces rose in salute. All around the clearing, Rotbringers, seeing the gesture, readied themselves to march. He looked down at Uktar. We go quietly from here, like the sleeping sickness on a summer's eve. Lead the way, Houndmaster. Take us to our prize. Uktar nodded and turned, chivying his maggot hounds into motion. The beasts gurgled in pleasure and loped away, Uktar trotting in their wake. Goral and his warriors followed. Goral felt Lifebiter squirm in his grip. The axe was eager. It knew its business, as did he. The heartstones of the writhing wield were close, and when he had them in his power, this place would know true dread. He looked down at the dying tree spirit as he rode past it. Toss that rubbish on the fire, then lead me to my prey, Houndmaster. I have a forest to tame. The outcast sleeps. Her addled thoughts surge up and drop down into the darkness at the root. Of her, crashing and cascading over rocks made from broken memories. There is only the rush and roar of it in her mind, drowning out all else save the wind of the reaping. The war wind. The outcast cannot hear anything over the shriek of the wind save her own voice, and that but dimly. It has always been that way, for as long as she can remember. Which is not long, as her folk judge things. Her mind fades with the seasons, reason growing bare like wind-stripped branches, before renewing itself once more. In the season of flourishing, she can almost hear the song of the sylvaneth. In the season of life's well, she can hear the trees whispering to one another as they stretch towards the sun. They do not speak to her, but she hears them nonetheless. But now, at this moment, the outcast hears only the sounds of war. She hears the weeping of the trees as their bark splits and their sap runs. She hears the leaves of the canopy shriek as the flames gobble them up. She hears the groan of the soil as poison spills over it, and the impotent roaring of the rocks as their surfaces are left seeping and scarred. But there are other stones, and these do not roar, but instead sing. Desperately, defiantly they sing. The outcast hears it all but does not stir. She refuses to stir. She will sleep. She will sleep until the world rots to nothing, and then she will sleep forevermore. Better to sleep, better to rot away with the world than to hear, to see. What? What do you fear? Drycha Hamadreth? The voice is soft at first, like the sound of newly sprouted leaves rustling in a breeze. A gentle sound, and its placidity infuriates the outcast, though she cannot fathom why. Awaken, daughter of my soul. Awaken, Drycha Hamadreth. The voice grows stronger, and the outcast shivers in her sleep. The sound of rain striking the canopy, The hint of distant thunder. There is pleading there, but also warning. The outcast wants to speak, to reach out, but something in her refuses. It is stubborn. She is stubborn. She will not be moved by pleas, by whispered entreaties. Heed me, best beloved one. Heed the words of the Everqueen. Awaken. Petulant, the outcast turns away. She is almost awake now, for the first time in a long time. Or perhaps not. She only stirs when time stands still, when the world shudders and winds on its track. The outcast stirs only with the war wind. That is what she knows. She is not beloved, best or otherwise. She is unloved, unheard, unremembered. She is forgotten until the season of reaping and despair, until the roots suckle seas of blood, until the stones which anchor the world roots scream out in desperation. The voice rises like the wind. There are no words now, merely force of will. It pushes at her, jostling against the walls of sleep, shaking her from the dark. The outcast screams in rage, trying to resist. She is strong, and her roots stretch deep. But the voice, her voice, is the soil which holds those roots. It is the moisture which nourishes them, and the wind which rips them loose. The outcast grips the darkness nonetheless, even as the shadows slip away, caught in the whirlwind of the voice. Her voice. Alarielle. Up, Cruelone, up, wildling, up, outcast. Awaken and rise, awaken. Awaken, Drycha Hamadreth. The outcast awakens and screams. The howl set the carrion crows in the upper branches to flight and caused Blighthoof to snarl in agitation. It had come from close by, too close for comfort. Goral twisted in his saddle, searching for the source of the sound. But rather than having one point of origin, it seemed to echo from every knothole and shadow. It slithered between the trees and filled the empty silence of the writhing weald. It was like a rumble of thunder, or the growl of an avalanche. "Steady!" he called out, as his warriors muttered among themselves. Even with the comforting, sickly light that spilled from the balefire torches his warriors carried, the darkness felt as if it were pressing in on them. "These cursed trees fair swallow the light," Sir Culgus croaked. In the silence which had descended in the wake of the scream, his voice seemed abominably loud. "We'll give them more light than they can choke down when we set our balefires to blazing," Goral rumbled. "We shall cast back the shadows of life and reveal our horrors with perfect clarity." The words sounded good, but the dark remained, and the echoes of the scream as well. What had it been? Some animal, perhaps. There were beasts aplenty in these forests. Iridescent worms, their scales flashing emerald, and packs of scuttling spiders, each as large as a chaos hound. But no beast he knew of screamed like that. Despite his bravado, his warriors crowded together. The voice of grandfather was but a dim rumble here. There were the bones of men and monsters filling the hollows within the roots. A stark reminder that they were not the first warband to attempt this feat. Every Rotbringer felt the choking weight of uncorrupted life on the air, seeking to smother them. Actor used his broad, broken-tipped sword to chop a path through the tangled density of the forest. Sir Culgus and the others did the same, hacking at the branches and roots which seemed to rise up in opposition to them. Goral longed to topple the trees and burn their roots to ash. But that was a fool's game. They could burn 1,000 trees and make no impact on the writhing wield's size. It grew larger with every passing year, denying Nurgle his rightful due. The forest swallowed bastions and pox gardens, setting back the hard work of ages. Only by taking control of the heartstones of the writhing weald could Nurgle claim this forest as he had others, such as the grove of blighted lanterns or the glade of horned growths. Only by cleaving the great stones he'd seen in the visions conjured by the Lady of Cankerwall, and blighting the crystal source waters which fed the cursed trees looming above them, could he salvage this place. Branches cracked and splintered in the dark, noises separate from the thud of axes and the rattle of swords. Unseen things were moving past the Rotbringers, flowing away from them, heading. Where? Goral peered into the dark as he urged Blighthoof on. What were they fleeing from? His Rotbringers? Or something else? Again he wondered what the lady had seen, and what she had not told him. He shook his head, banishing his fears. "We are the hunters in this forest, not the hunted. Grandfather stands at my right hand, and the king of flies at my left," he murmured. Lifebiter quivered encouragingly. "Almost there, my lord," Actor murmured. The Hound Master was trudging alongside him. "We caught the other one around here. You can hear them. And feel that? Something is calling them home to the forest's heart." He shook his head. "They always run." Goral grunted. The air was reverberating now, with a bone-deep throb that set his remaining teeth to itching. It was as if the scream had been but a prelude to this new intrusion of noise. The Heartstones, he thought. He could feel it in his bones. Blightoof whickered softly. He looked up, eyes narrowed. Something shone, out in the dark. At first, he thought it was balefire, but it lacked the oily sheen. Instead, it put him in mind of sunlight reflected on rolling waters. Goral's lip curled. The forest was filled with sound now, so that the noise of the Rotbringer's approach was obscured. The trees were shuddering as if caught in a hurricane wind, and the shadows were full of movement. He kicked Blightoof into a gallop, and Sir Culgus and the others followed his example. Uktor led the rest of the Rotbringers in Goral's wake, his hounds yelping and scuttling around him. Goral slowed as he reached the edges of the light and lifted Lifebiter in a signal to dismount. The other knights jerked on their reins, causing their steeds to rear and screech. Goral slid from the saddle and led Blightoof forwards. The light, soft as it was, stung his eyes and skin, and he raised Lifebiter to shade his face. The trees and their tangling roots began to thin and bend, revealing a vast rotunda-like glade. The canopy overhead was so thick that no light could pierce its shadowed recesses. The trees at the edges of the clearing bent outwards, as if pushed away from the edifice which occupied its grassy heart. Even the roots were humped and coiled, like paving stones leading into a sacred temple. And at the center of the glade, radiating a soft light and unbearable warmth, were the stones. Goral hissed in his satisfaction, even as the Lady of Cankerwall had promised. The stones were large, many hands taller than the gaunt, branch-antlered tree spirits which had gathered before them, crooked talons raised as if in supplication. The man-sized creatures surrounded the stones in a loose circle. A trickle of gleaming water poured down from some unseen source within the stones and dampened the verdant grasses. A shroud of vibrant green moss almost obscured the strange sigils which had been carved into the flat face of each of the stones. Goral didn't recognize the markings, for they were unlike any dread marking or bane symbol he was familiar with. But whatever they were, Lifebiter was eager to deface them. The axe strained in his hands like one of Uktor's hounds, its thorny haft digging painfully into his palms. Some instinct held him back. If they attacked now, the tree spirits would simply scatter and vanish. The forest would swallow them up, and even Uktor wouldn't be able to track them. Let them begin, he thought. Let them start whatever they had come to this place to do. Then, and only then, would come the time to strike. As one, the tree spirits extended their arms, and their bark-like flesh began to unravel and stretch with a cacophonous hiss. Talon and claw blended, forming an unbroken ring of bodies about the circumference of the shining stones. Root-like toes dug into the soil, anchoring them. Branch-laced skulls tipped back as jagged mouths opened, and a dirge-like groan rose, softly at first, but growing louder and deeper with every moment. The sound pulsated on the air, pounding at Goral's ears as he climbed back into Blighthoof's saddle. "What are they doing?" The young knight Pallid Woes mumbled through the seeping bandages wrapped about his head. He pointed as he hauled himself up onto his own steed, and Goral looked. The stones were shining as brightly as the moon, where they were not covered in moss. Leaves rose, cast into the air by the wind. The song of the tree spirits rose higher and fiercer. The stones shimmered and grew indistinct as the light swelled. It was even as the Lady of Cankerwall had said, and Grandfather through her. The secret of the writhing weald, and why no one had been able to find its thudding, stony heart. The accursed tree things were singing it elsewhere, singing it to safety. If it was allowed to vanish, Goral and his warriors might spend a century searching before stumbling across it again. Now, take them now. Goral kicked Blighthoof into a gallop and charged towards the ring of preoccupied treefolk. For Nurgle and the garden, Lifebiter wailed eagerly as he swung it down on one of the tree things, splitting it from branches to trunk. The edges of the wound turned black and powdery, and the golden sap of the creature became turgid and murky as the axe's venom took hold. The tree spirit toppled with a rattling cry, tearing loose from its fellows, and the dreadful song faltered for a moment before rising anew. Goral jerked on Blighthoof's reins, turning his steed about. "They are trying to steal our prize, brothers. Teach them the folly of denying grandfather his due," he roared, urging Blighthoof towards more of the tree things that lurched out of the forest, seeking to defend their cowardly ritual. The one in the lead was far larger than the others, more than 3 times the height of a man, with a gnarled bulk that bespoke a monstrous strength. Goral thought it was surely a lord of its kind. The massive being strode to meet his charge as its followers swarmed in its wake, its every step causing the ground to shake. As he drew close, roots suddenly rose up like striking serpents and tangled about Blighthoof's legs. The horse thing shrilled and lashed out, but the roots were everywhere. Goral struck with Lifebiter, hacking through the writhing tendrils. The axe vibrated in his hand, pleased. A moment later, the tree lord loomed over him. Goral gagged as the stink of the living forest engulfed him. Scything talons scraped down his armor. The force of the blow nearly tore him from the saddle. Goral laughed, despite the pain. "Yes, yes! Fight me, you creaking horror!" he roared, spinning Lifebiter about. He sliced a divot out of his opponent's flesh, shattering branches and tearing vines. Black strands of corruption spread from the edges of the wound, and the tree lord staggered. Its agonized wheeze sounded like branches clattering in a windstorm. Bark bubbled and sloughed away. The tree lord flung out a talon, and Goral was forced to turn Blighthoof aside as a storm of squirming roots shot towards him. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw pallid woes gallop towards the tree lord, flail whirling above his head. The creature creaked aside more swiftly than Goral would have thought possible, avoiding the charge. Long arms snapped out, and Woes was snatched from his saddle. He cried out Nurgle's name, but to no avail. The tree lord gave a twist of its claws and wrung the young knight's body like a wet rag, crushing him and dappling the thirsty roots with his blood. It flung what was left aside and turned as Goral gave a cry and charged. More roots pierced the air, arrowing towards the Lord Duke. They struck his armor and spread like oil, wriggling into every nook and cranny. Others burrowed beneath Blighthoof's flesh, causing the horse thing to buck and squeal in pain. Roaring, Goral slashed at the writhing roots, trying to cut his way free. He could feel them tightening about him as the tree lord stomped towards him. "Leave him, beast!" Uctor shouted. The loyal houndmaster hewed at the tree lord's legs with wild abandon, his rusted sword carving weeping gouges in the creature's jagged bark. Uctor's maggot hounds burbled and snarled as they worried at the darting roots. The tree lord turned, eyes blazing with an eerie light. It swatted Uctor from his feet with a swing of its long arm. "Mistake," Goral said, with a guttural laugh. "I'm the one you should be worried about, brute." Blightoof surged forwards with a whinny and drove its shoulder into the tree lord's back. As the monstrosity turned with a creaking roar, Goral drove Lifebiter into the center of its face. The tree lord staggered back with a scream, a pungent smoke spewing from the wound. Golden trails of sap spattered Goral's arm and chest as he swung the axe again and sheared off one of his opponent's branches. The tree lord stumbled away from him, clutching at its ruined head. It sank down, moaning hoarsely, satisfied that it was all but finished. Goral turned. He saw Sir Culgus tear the head from a tree thing with one sweep of his sword as it tried to crawl away. A few of his warriors had fallen, but not so many that they could not do what they had come here to do. And they had not died alone. Sap-oozing bodies lay broken and twisted across the glade. He felt some relief in finding that the heartstones still stood where he'd seen them last. They still glowed and pulsed, but not with the stinging brightness. Their vibratory song had grown muted, like the panting of a wounded animal. "Soon you will sing again. But this time it will be a tune more to grandfather's liking," Goral thought, pleased. He felt like howling his triumph to the skies. Instead he turned, seeking the fallen tree lord. He would extract a measure of joy from the creature's stiff hide. Perhaps he would even lay its head at the feet of his Lady of Cankerwall as proof of his devotion. "Will you offer me a smile then, my lady?" His own smile faded as he realized that the tree lord was gone. Goral cursed. A trail of spilled sap led out of the glade. It hadn't been as wounded as he'd thought. "Hunt the wounded one down, Uchter," Goral snarled, angry at himself. "I want that brute's branches for my trophy rack. It must pay for daring to defy Nurgle's will, and for denying me the joy of the kill," he thought savagely. "We'll strip the bark from whatever passes for its bones, my lord," the huntsman said, whistling for his dogs. The wormy chaos hounds yelped and bounded out of the glen, loping after the wounded tree lord. They had gotten a taste of its roots and were excited to finish the job they had started. Goral knew how they felt. He knew he should not leave. The lady had said he must embed Lifebiter in the heart of this place to accomplish his quest. But there was time enough for that after he'd indulged himself. Perhaps he would chain the thing rather than kill it and drag it back to Cankerwall. Such thoughts were pleasant, if untoward. They reeked of hope, but Goral thought grandfather would forgive him his vices. "Sir Colgus, see to these damnable stones. Topple them and make this place fit for Nurgle's chosen." "I'm for the hunt," Goral said, as he thudded his heels into Blighthoof's flanks and urged his steed after Uchter and his hounds. A number of the others followed him, ignoring Culgus' raspy commands. Goral laughed. He was inclined to leniency. After all, was grandfather not indulgent of his children? "Come, brothers, ride hard," he shouted, still laughing. "Our prey awaits us." In her delirium, the outcast calls out. She casts her voice into the teeth of the world, listening as it echoes through shadows and knotholes. The wind carries her call to the secret places of this weald, this wood, where sane things fear to tread. She's not alone in her status as outcast, though some part of her believes that perhaps she was the first. There are others, broken things with cracked souls and minds riven by hunger and fear. Inside her flesh, hive spites stir, and she feels their confusion. They have slumbered too, these tiny spirits. As they awaken, they begin to speak in their high, buzzing voices, murmuring to her as children to their mother. They seek comfort and reassurance, but she has none to give them. There is nothing of the nurturer in her, nothing of the caretaker. The song of the sylvaneth is not for her or hers, only the song of the reaping, only the war song. She begins to sing, and as she sings, she strides the root road through the shadows of the forest, at once insubstantial and implacable. The forest is under attack. The sound of its pain catches and tears at her secret knots, loosening some and pulling others painfully taut. Memories mutter deep in her, the sound of them almost lost among the murmurings of her spites. She twitches, trying to see through the murk of what once was or what might have been, and find the trail of the now. Her feet seek the hard path of the present. Something happened. That is all the outcast knows. Some black moment, forever etched in the bark of the world. The Everqueen knows but will not say. The outcast shrieks again, in frustration now rather than command. She can feel the edges of that black moment in the air and soil, like a wound that will not heal. It reverberates through her, searing her mind and filling her with dread purpose. The land is sick and dying, but not dead yet. Not yet, and never again. The outcast will not allow it. Not again. The thought snags, uncomfortably close to epiphany. The outcast remembers lies and forgets truth, or so the Everqueen has said. That is why she is outcast, and the word of the Everqueen is law. Thus her words must be true. But then why does the outcast remember them? Questions hum through her mind like wasps in a hive. Her thoughts race like fire through dry grass, igniting old fears and desires. She has been asleep for so long, so long. Her roots ache with need, and the hive spikes nestled within her hiss eagerly. It is time to hunt. To hunt. To hunt, she sings. The need is like a creek swelled by the spring-fed tide, unnoticed until it is no longer ignorable, and then all-consuming all at once. It races through her roots and branches, filling her. The trees are singing as well, but she cannot hear them. She sees them swaying with the wind, their roots stretching deeper and deeper, seeking strength as she strides past, cloaked all in shadow. Leaves twitch back, afraid to touch her or be touched. She is anathema, forgotten, outcast. So Alarielle has said, and the word of the Everqueen is law. The forests fear her, and rivers recede at her approach. Animals and spirits fall silent in her wake. Root claws gouge the earth as she stalks forwards now, growing, unfolding. Sap runs and forms layer after layer. Scything talons of bark and stone and vine sprout swell and flatten. They thin to well-used points. They will tear iron and crush bone. The outcast is still singing as she pulls herself through the shuddering trees, leaving tiny scratches on their trembling bark to remind them of this moment. "Remember me. Remember this moment," she sings as the forest begins to scream. She can hear the wails of the dryads and the agonized bellow of one of the ancients. The great song falters, interrupted. Its last notes hang suspended, quavering on the air. Her song matches the echo and drives it to flight. Hers is the only melody now, whatever the Everqueen intended. You have called, and I have come. I am here. I hunt. I slay. Remember. The outcast laughs and the forest falls silent, abashed. Then, a sigh of noise fills the emptiness, like a soft black whisper. The broken ones. They have found her trail and follow her now, snuffling at her heels. They slash past her, broken bat-like shapes and gaunt, loping shades, chittering and shrieking. The reaperkin, the reavers and outcast kind. They have heard her song and found it to their liking. They fly at her command, laughing in mad joy. They will hunt the forest and harry the foe and drive them back towards her. She does not slow as she reaches the glade where the heartstones thud in fear. The pounding of the stones calls out to her, drawing her on, as Alarielle knew it would. Fully awake now, the outcast feels the weight of the world's pain, and she desires nothing more than to punish those who would dare set foot in the holy places of the sylvaneth. The glade glows with warm light as she enters its circle in a skirl of leaves. She sees the defilers, the rotten ones, the grubmen, through the eyes of every tree and blade of grass, all at once and from 1,000 directions. They are small compared to her, and their souls are weak things, flickering on the edge of awareness. Like her, they are deaf to the song, though they lack even the knowledge of their handicap. But she will show them. The outcast tears through the veil of worlds. They are slow to react, slow to understand. She lunges towards the closest of them and fills the air with sour blood. Trees bend towards her as she attacks, uprooted and added to her mass despite their protests. She reaches out, crushing the head of another of the would-be defilers as easily as she might snatch a worm from the soil. They are so fragile, the outcast thinks, these piles of meat and muscle. They are ephemeral things, bundles of scattered moments soon forgotten. But dangerous, so dangerous. They have wounded the realm. The sky weeps poison and the rivers are stagnant. She feels it all with every breath, and tears of sap run down her cheeks. But it is rage she feels, not sadness. The outcast is not the Everqueen. I will not run. I will not hide, she thinks. I will hunt. I will slay. I will kill until the trees grow fat on red water. She kills 2 more before they see her fully, for she is cloaked in a storm of leaves and splintered branches. The forest seeks to hide her monstrousness, ashamed. It needs her and hates her for that need, though she does not understand why. Animals squeal and stamp as she ravages. among them snapping their greenstick bones and tearing their filthy flesh. They are half dead already, these things, as are their riders. So much mulch for the hungry soil. A heavy-set warrior, clad in boils and barnacled iron, heaves himself towards her, spewing the high-pitched bird noises which pass for words among his kind. The outcast cannot stand the shrill screams of the meat. They do not sing. They squeak and scream. Too fast, too high. She desires their silence. A foul blade bites into her hives, eliciting shrieks of outrage from her spikes. Flitterfuries pour from the honeycombs in her arms and shoulders and swirl about the warrior in a glittering, stinging cloud. The spikes drive him back as the outcast advances. She tears the blade from his hands and catches his flabby face in her talons. He hammers at her bark with ineffectual fists, still squeaking. Why do they talk so much, she wonders? Why do they clog the air with words and the sound of meat slapping against meat? Fragile, so fragile, she thinks, as she pulls the sour one's head apart, stripping flesh and muscle from bone, one red blossom at a time. His squeals fall silent, and she sighs in relief. Bits of his flesh dangle from her claws, but the outcast loses interest as a ring of iron and fire surrounds her. She hisses, and her spikes hiss with her. They stream from her hives and launch themselves at the enemy. The ring of iron and fire comes apart as she strides through the glen, stalking and killing. Some flee rather than face her. These the outcast ignores as she continues her butchery. The forest will take them. The broken ones will drag them into the dark. That is their pleasure. Like her, they are hidden beneath the canopy, forgotten and ignored until the reaping comes and the war wind blows. When the last of the defilers dangles ruined from her claws, she stops. The song of the heartstones has caught her attention, and for an instant, just an instant, the song of the reaping gives way to the blooming, and war is drowned out by peace. The outcast sways in place, listening, and in that moment she is outcast no longer. She is Drycha Hamadreth, first daughter of the Sylvaneth, auspicious and honoured. She hears the song of her kin for the first time in a long time, and feels the tears of Isha upon her cheeks. "See me, hear me," she croons, reaching out with one monstrous talon. She wishes to touch them just for a moment, to feel again the warmth of the blooming and the suns, to taste the sweet waters so long denied her. She wishes. A sour one moans at her feet. The moment is broken. She lifts a foot and stomps down, turning bones to powder and flesh to jelly. "No, do not touch me. Fear me," the outcast hisses, glaring at the trembling heartstones. For an instant, she almost forgot. No, she will never forget and never remember. For her, there is no song. There is only the now. There is only the reaping and the wind. The outcast throws back her head and screams. The tree lord was gone. A trail of golden sap marked its stumbling flight. The trees sought to hide it, but Acta's hounds found it and followed it regardless. They led Goral and the others on a yelping chase away from the glade and the hateful light of the stones. Golden handprints and smears led them deeper into the dark and the quiet of the forest, until the only light was that of their torches, and the only sound was the susurrus of the leaves. But their quarry was nowhere to be found. Even Acta's hounds seemed to have lost the trail, and they now circled and yelped in apparent confusion. Goral cursed and smacked a fist on his saddle horn. Some part of him had expected as much. "Where is that cursed thing? It can't have gotten far, not with the wounds I gave it," he said. He glared down at Acta, wanting an answer, though he knew the Houndmaster would not know. Before Acta could reply, a monstrous shriek echoed through the forest. The yelping chaos hounds fell silent and slunk back towards their master, tails tucked between their legs. The shriek seemed to grow in strength, reverberating in the dark before finally fading away. Goral gripped Lifebiter more tightly. "What is that blasted thing? Why does it not come out if it wishes to challenge us?" he said. He straightened in his saddle and peered into the dark. He thought he saw something moving beneath the shroud of roots, but dismissed the idea. A serpent, he thought, or some weak spirit seeking to hide from them. "My hounds don't like it, my lord," Ucta said, peering at the trees warily. "There's something new in the air, a smell." Goral nodded. He could detect it as well. At first, he thought it was the stones and whatever magic was seeping from them inundating the surrounding trees, but this wasn't the smell of either rock or sorcery. Not quite. It was a sickly sweet reek, like too ripe flowers, close to the pleasing odor of rot, but not quite. And it was everywhere, and growing stronger, like the hint of rain, heralding a storm, he thought. But the smell wasn't the whole of it. The trees were trembling, but not, he thought, from fear. No, they were trembling with anticipation, as if the forest were a wounded animal and it was about to turn on its hunters. They seemed to crowd around his warriors, and the roots beneath their feet twisted slowly into new and horrid shapes. It's waking up, he thought, and he couldn't say why he'd thought it. They'd hacked and burned a scar across its face, but it was only now stirring. For the first time in a long time, Goral felt what might have been the embers of an old and forgotten fear stirring. Ucta's maggot hounds were whimpering, and his warriors were sounding little better. They had faced the shimmer-scaled devils of the stars and the silver-armored warriors who rode the lightning, but now, here, their courage was stretched thin, like a ligament extended past its breaking point. The joy they'd felt only moments ago had dissipated, leaving behind only silence. "Perhaps we should turn back," Uctor said. "Once we shatter those stones, whatever lurks here will wither and be no more threat. We can call on aid from the rest of the Order, or rouse the musters of Festafane and Cankerwall if need be." Goral ground his teeth in frustration. In the dark, something laughed. The Chaos Hounds began to bay shrilly, and their horses whinnied and stamped. "Light! More light!" Goral snapped. He reached down and snatched a crackling torch out of a Rotbringer's hand. He slung it away. It rolled across the carpet of roots, casting weird shadows. His knights and warriors followed suit. The dark retreated in bits and pieces, leaving oily pools of blackness between the trees. More laughter. Something peered at him from behind a tree. Goral twisted in his saddle, but whatever it was gone. Chuckles echoed down like raindrops. Childish laughter slithered up from the roots. Goral heard wood scrape against wood. He caught glimpses of pale flesh or tangled bark, never in the same place twice. "Steady, brothers," Goral said as he tried to control his restive steed. "We are the hunters here. What we have claimed, they cannot take back." As he spoke, the laughter ceased. Silence fell. Then the crackling. Not of balefire, but like twigs snapping. One of his warriors gestured with his sword. "I saw something," he gurgled. "In that tree." Goral looked. The tree was a stunted thing, sheared in half by some long-ago axe stroke. In the flickering glare of the fallen torches, he could make out something moving, many somethings. Then, cackling, shrieking, they spilled out of the cloven tree, crooked bark talons reaching. Pest-swollen flesh popped and tore as they swarmed over Goral's warriors, biting and clawing. They moved quickly, like dead leaves caught in a cold wind. A Rotbringer stumbled, clutching at his torn throat. Another was yanked upwards, into the shadowy canopy, legs kicking. More of them descended on his knights, knocking them from their horses. Armor buckled and split as blows rained down. Shields splintered and shivered apart. Axes and swords were yanked from hands or left embedded in trees. Bellowing warriors were mobbed by dozens of spirits and dragged away. Chaos hounds were pulled howling beneath the roots by unseen claws. The blessings of Nurgle granted strength and durability, but those gifts were useless here. Cyclones of stabbing bark talons and gnashing fangs tore even the most doughty Rotbringer to bloody strips. "Back! Fall back!" Goral roared. He lashed out with his axe, removing a groping claw. "Leave me!" he snarled as the cackling tree spirits crowded around Blighthoof. They had the faces of aged children, stretched taut across bones of root and vine. Teeth like splinters tore at his legs and Blighthoof's neck. The horse thing shrilled in agony and reared, lashing out with its hooves even as Goral swept his axe out, hacking at them savagely. The tree spirits retreated, but only for a moment. Laughing, they scuttled across the trees and over the roots like insects, pursuing his remaining warriors as they retreated. Goral hauled on Blighthoof's reins, turning his steed about. "Fall back to the Heartstones!" he bellowed. He couldn't say whether any of the others heard him. He bisected a chittering spirit with Lifebiter and then turned Blighthoof away. He raced through the forest, and the tree spirits followed him, swooping and surging out of the dark. He fended them off with wild blows from his axe. "Toying with me," he thought as he bent low over Blighthoof's neck. He had heard stories about the malevolent spirits which lurked in the shadows of the forests, things which were of the tree spirits but apart from them. Twisted things, more savage and cruel than any demon, for they were bound by no god's will. Old things, blighted, embittered and monstrous. If these creatures infested the writhing weald, it was no wonder Nurgle desired its taming. If he could make it back to the stones, shatter them, defile them, they might yet have a chance. The forest would grow weak. Goral looked around, trying to spot the light of the stones. But he saw only darkness or the brief bounding motion of a torch swiftly snuffed. He wondered whether Ukta was one of those. He'd lost sight of the Houndmaster in the attack. Goral hoped the warrior was still alive. As soon as the thought had crossed his mind, he heard Ukta cry out, in pain or perhaps in challenge. Goral twisted Blightoof about, pursuing the sound, and the horse thing brayed in protest. "Ukta, hold on, my friend. I am coming," he shouted. If anyone could find their way back to the stones, it was Ukta. "This way, my lord," Ukta's voice called out, and Goral saw a spark of light. "Hurry, this way!" Goral pointed Blightoof towards the flickering of the Houndmaster's torch. When he reached its light, he saw the torch on the ground and Ukta standing just out of sight, gesturing to him. What was the fool doing? Trying to hide behind a tree. Goral grimaced. Perhaps he was injured.
"Ukta, what?" Goral began. Ukta made a horrid, wet sound, and what was left of him staggered into the light. His flesh had been perforated at 100 points by thin tendrils of bark which stretched back towards the creatures which followed close behind him. The two grey-faced spirits grinned wickedly at him as they manipulated their tendrils and made Ukta stumble like a marionette. One reached around and caught his sagging features, squeezing his mouth open. As it did so, it said, this way," in a raspy approximation of Ukta's voice. The other cackled and added its voice to that of its companion. "This way, this way, this way, hurry, hurry." Goral watched in revulsion as the tree spirits made his Houndmaster dance a merry jig, scattering droplets of blood around and around. Ukta groaned pitiably as they jerked his limbs this way and that. Then, with a final mocking cackle, the spirits hunched forwards and stretched their talons, wide tearing Ukta apart in a welter of steaming gore. The sight of his warrior's demise snapped Goral from his fugue, and he drove his heels into Blighthoof's sides. The horse thing screamed and charged. The spirits retreated, still laughing. They bounded from tree to tree, as if they were no more substantial than shadows. Enraged, Goral urged Blightoof to greater speed. Roots blackened and decayed beneath the horse thing's thundering hooves. But no matter how fast his steed ran, the tree spirits stayed just out of reach. Suddenly, Blightoof fell screaming and Goral was hurled from the saddle. He scrambled to his feet, broken ribs scraping his heaving lungs. Blightoof kicked and screeched in distress as roots burrowed into the muscles of its legs. Flowers and moss sprouted from the horse thing's abused flesh, obscuring its tattered hide. Blightoof snapped blindly at the air as its greasy mane began to crawl with grass and thistles. More roots snaked around the horse thing, restraining its thrashing form as it sought to rise. "No! Blightoof, no, no!" Goral wheezed as he stumbled towards Lifebiter, embedded in a stump during his fall. He jerked the axe free and staggered back towards his faithful steed. Vainly he chopped at the vines and roots, but it was useless. Almost all of Blightoof was shrouded in verdant greenery now, eaten away from the inside out. "Up! Get up!" Goral cried, trying to tear the roots away from his steed's neck and muzzle. "Fight it, you stupid beast! Fight!" He trailed off. Only one of Blighthoof's eyes was visible now, rolling madly in its weeping socket, but he could still hear the horse thing's agonized grunts. Goral laid his hand on the side of his steed's head. "I'm sorry, my friend," he whispered. Then, crying out in rage, he brought Lifebiter down on Blighthoof's skull. The horse thing's thrashings slowed, then stilled. Goral tore his axe free and turned away. He limped through the trees, not caring whether he was going the right way or not. Sometimes he heard the screams of his warriors, and occasionally the pained shrieking of one of Uctor's poor hounds. But mostly he heard the pale, giggling things as they swept past him and above him, always out of sight. Whenever he dared to slow, to catch his breath, they hurtled towards him out of the dark, attacking until he began to move again. Black blood and bile was running down his limbs when he at last staggered back into the glade. He shouted for Sir Culgus, but received no reply. Blearily he scanned the glade. Besides the stones and the crumbling bodies of the slain tree spirits, it was empty. There was no sign of the warriors he'd left to deface the glade, save for a sword embedded in the ground. He limped towards it, and as he drew close, he recognized it as Sir Culgus's blade. Roots clung to it, and as he watched in sickened fascination, they drew the sword down into the dark soil until it was completely lost to sight. Goral looked down. He caught glimpses of rounded armor plates and twitching fingers covered in grass, and suspicious hummocks of moss and flowers which might have once been bodies. Branches creaked above him, but he did not look. He could hear the laughter of the tree spirits just past the edge of the glade. They were taunting him, trying to draw him out. As they have before, he thought angrily. The forest had drawn them in and swallowed them whole, the way it had done to uncounted others. But Goral intended to show it that it bitten off more than it could chew this time. As if they knew what he was thinking, the unseen spirits laughed again, filling his ears with their mockery. "I do not fear you. This is the moment I was created for," Goral said, lifting Lifebiter. But his words sounded hollow, and his axe shuddered fearfully in his grip. "I am not afraid. I am the Lord Duke of Festafane, and I am not afraid," he thought. The carpet of grass undulated beneath his feet. "I am not afraid. My moment has come. Come and die, monster," he shouted, turning slowly. "Where are you?" Screams were the only reply. The screams of his warriors, as something hurt them deep in the dark. He heard the whine of crumpling armor and the squeals of dying horses. And above it all, the laughter. It spread like a miasma, creeping under the branches and winding about him. A low, sad sound, made horrifying by its incongruity. Whatever was out there was laughing as it spilt seas of sour blood. But there was no humor in the sound, no joy. They weren't even enjoying the slaughter, and that made it all the worse. Goral turned. The heartstones still throbbed. They pulsed with heat, like an infected wound, but it wasn't the right sort of infection. It was wrong, like the forest. It was all wrong. He wondered whether the others who had fallen here had known as much in their final moments. This place lived. It would not, could not surrender. Not to axes or fire, not to despair. The mad did not. No, when they were beaten, and this place was truly mad. He felt the old familiar fingers of despair, such as he had known only once before, when he'd been who he was, before Blightoof had come to him. He had not been Goral then, but in despair he'd found strength. In surrender he'd found purpose. "As I have found it now," he said, raising Lifebiter. If he could not befoul the stones, he would destroy them. If he could not tame this place, he would lay it low at least. He would hurt it as it had never been hurt. "Lend me your strength, grandfather," Goral said, as he advanced on the stones. One blow would be enough to spread a contagion that would never be cured. This place would wither and die, though not immediately, and he suspected he would not be here to see it. The pulse quickened, as if the stones knew what he intended, and were afraid. He smiled. Good.
It was good that he had taught them that much at least. Lifebiter sang in his hands as he readied the killing blow. In Grandfather's name, for the honor of the Order of the Fly. A branch snapped behind him. Goral spun. A blow smashed him from his feet. Somehow he managed to hold on to Lifebiter and used the haft of the axe to lever himself upright. The thing followed him as he rose and stumbled back. How had he not seen it before? How could such a creature hide? Or had it been following him? It was like nothing he had ever seen before, a hideous instrument of life run riot. It towered over him. Long, bestial limbs sprouted horrid blossoms across a surface that was swelling and contracting constantly. Great, honey-soaked hives clung to its shoulders and torso, their chambers full of squirming, humming shapes. Iridescent insects bored in and out of its flesh in continuous activity. Flowers blossomed, unfurled, and withered in the space of moments before repeating the cycle. Long, flat talons, dripping with gore, flexed as if in anticipation. But its face was the worst of all, at once feminine and monstrous in its nest of thorny locks. That hideous head cocked, watching him. Gleaming tears of sap ran down its face. Goral couldn't breathe. The air had grown thick and sweet. Insects circled him, wings shimmering with dew and light. He could no longer feel Grandfather's presence. Lifebiter whimpered in his hands, and he knew the axe was afraid. The moment stretched taut. The abomination lifted a claw. Goral recognized what was left of Sir Culger's face, twisting on a talon tip. "For Nurgle and the garden!" Goral roared. He lunged. Lifebiter raised. A blow rocked him back on his heels. A second lifted him into the air. Lifebiter slipped from numb fingers as he hurtled backwards. His back struck something unyielding, and he felt his spine crack. The warmth of the stones spread over him, and he clawed uselessly at the ground, trying to move away from it. He could feel it burning the blessings of Nurgle from him. The grass caressed his limbs, snaring them. Soil filled his mouth, and he gagged. His legs didn't work. In time, if he managed to get away, his back might heal, but for now he was all but helpless, crippled and broken. The grass pressed against him, seeking a way beneath his armor. It murmured to him, and the heartstones sang softly, but he refused to listen. Desperate now, remembering what had happened to Blighthoof, Goral tore an arm free of the winding grasses and groped for Lifebiter's haft. If he could reach the axe! If! Wood creaked and the smell of honey filled his nose. The abomination sank to its haunches and watched him. Strange insect-like things crawled in and out of its hives. It reached out with one claw and touched Lifebiter. The axe made a sound like a wounded cat as vines and roots rose up about its haft and slid into the wood. The haft cracked and burst, growing. The blade, blessed by Nurgle, lay where it was, avoided and ignored. Goral wondered if anyone would ever find it. Or would it lay here forever, a tainted patch in this verdant hell? Maybe that had been Grandfather's will all along. Infection grew from the smallest scratch after all. He looked up at the creature, struggling to meet its gaze. His bones ached where they were not numb, and his blood was seeping into the soil. Even Grandfather's blessings couldn't save him. But the pain, as ever, brought clarity. I am done, he thought. He had striven and failed, and now the grass would shroud his bones. Was this what his lady had seen in her pox clouds? Was this moment the cause of her sadness on that final day? Had she despaired of him? He thought so and gave silent thanks for it. Goral looked into the dull, black eyes of his killer and saw a most beautiful despair there. Like him, it had surrendered. Not to Nurgle, but perhaps to something worse, for its surrender had brought it no comfort. There was no joy in its eyes, no serenity. Goral smiled weakly and said, "You are truly beautiful, my lady, and far more damned than I." And when the first roots pierced his armor and the flesh beneath, Lord Duke Goral of Festafan smiled in contentment. The outcast watches the last of the defilers vanish into the soil. His rotted body, like the others, will be purged and cleansed before it is used to feed the roots of this place. The writhing weald grows strong on the bodies of those who seek to kill it. And yet, she feels no satisfaction at this. She wonders what he said in his hummingbird voice, too high and swift for her to understand. A curse, perhaps. The outcast knows all about curses, for she is wreathed in them. They inundate her and strengthen her. More, she is a curse, Alarielle's curse. She hears the Everqueen's voice on the wind, murmuring soft comforts to the trees and the sylvaneth who hide in their depths. Her words send the other outcasts fleeing, seeking their safe places now that they are no longer needed. The reaping has passed, the Everqueen whispers, let the wind fade. The outcast looks up into the canopy which twists and coils in on itself and becomes a face, vast and wise and hateful. Her face, mother and betrayer, queen and usurper, friend and foe. To the outcast, Alarielle slides from one to the next with every breath. She is unpredictable and terrible and weak. The reaping has passed, Drycha Hamadreth. Cease your song, daughter. The voice is soft and insistent, persistent. It dapples her mind like dew, spreading warmth, driving back the cold. And as it spreads, the outcast hears the song, swelling out of 100 glades, resonating within the very heart of her. In the song are echoes of other years and other lives, of time out of time and broken worlds. The song is ancient and redolent of a world that was, and it rises to a triumphal thunder in her mind. It weighs on her, burying her in its warmth. The hot stones echo with it, and as before, the outcast wishes to feel once more the warmth of the blooming and the suns, to remember the taste of sweet waters. She is Drycha Hamadreth, first daughter of the sylvaneth. She is auspicious and honoured. She hears the song and feels its warmth blow through her. And then, all at once, it is gone. Their reaping is done for now. Best beloved done. Sleep, sleep. Enraged, the outcast stiffens. The fires of her fury, growing dim, are stoked anew. She remembers now. She will not sleep. The reaping has come, and there is yet more to be done. She is not beloved. She is unloved. She is forgotten until the forests scream in pain and the world trembles, until the very realm roots call out in desperation. No, she is awake now, and she will not go back to sleep. Alarielle's voice falls silent, and her presence recedes. Perhaps she is angry at her wayward daughter, or maybe even pleased, but the outcast does not care. A storm is coming, and Drycha Hamadreth will fight at its forefront. She is the roar of the forest fire and the crushing weight of the avalanche. She is the moment of madness which makes animals foam and gnaw the air. She is all of these things and worse. She is the dark at the heart of the forest, and she is angry. The song of the sylvaneth is not for her or those she will call up. Only the war song howling down from the high places to the low.